social issue. We don't think that you're showing real political leadership. We think that real political leadership, the type of leadership that goes above and beyond some service, the type of leadership that we should thank, the type of leadership that befits the massive opportunities that we gave Fianna Fáil, is one that is willing to make hard decisions, is one that is willing to actually lead this country and to make it somewhere that we can be proud of. This isn't a debate about keeping the country ticking over or fixing potholes or making sure that we all have a bit more cash in our pockets than we did 50 years ago. Those are things that we should expect from our governments as standard. This isn't a debate about whether or not Fianna Fáil were better than Fine Gael. This is a debate about whether Fianna Fáil were as good as they could have been, whether they rose to the standard that we set for them and that they set for themselves when they called themselves the Republican Party and the party of the people. We don't care if a lot of political parties in a lot of countries are corrupt or fail. We don't care if we're being idealistic. We think that idealism is fair when you're saying that we owe a debt of gratitude as a nation to Fianna Fáil. The simple truth is that they didn't live up to the standards that they set for themselves. Niamh asked you, was it for this? Did we fight and die for independence so that we could have a government of bland populism and basic management? We don't think so. Politics is supposed to be about leadership and about sacrifice, but Fianna Fáil's unwillingness to make hard choices, unwillingness to put the good of the nation ahead of the good of the Fianna Fáil political party has made Ireland a lesser place, a place that we can't be proud of. We don't owe thanks to them for doing the bare minimum necessary to keep the country going and to keep themselves ahead of the political game. They owe us for the decades of power that they have squandered, for the financial goods of the Celtic Tiger that they squandered, for the Ireland that they squandered. Saying that we owe them a debt of gratitude implies a level of service to this nation that Fianna Fáil have never been willing to give. We deserved better, ladies and gentlemen. You deserve better. And it gives me the very greatest of pleasure to oppose this motion.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've heard 12 speeches, and you've applauded each of those speeches. But could I invite you, because of the quality of the speeches and the range of argument we've heard tonight, to again show your appreciation for all 12 here. As you can see, the adjudicators are now retiring, and I have no experience of these debates in the past, and I have no idea how long the adjudicators will take. And we're all, as it were, in the dark on that, so we've got a little time to fill. It was suggested by someone that, I heard someone use the word vote, and I was going to say, until a few moments ago, that if we did have a vote here, it would be a truly secret ballot because I can't see anybody. But now that the lights have gone up, this does raise the possibility of actually having a vote. But if there was a vote, I'm afraid I would have to say that I would make a ruling just on my impression of the number of hands being shown. I would not endeavour to do a count in this situation, and so the result would be subject to my perception and possibly even my biases. But however, would you like a vote? Right. All those in favour of the proposition, please show. Thank you, thank you. Any against? Well, there's no way I can distort that result. I don't think it would be appropriate for me to say anything of substance on the motion itself, because I'm obviously looking in from outside and I don't have the engagement and the knowledge and the experience that you have. I did find the terminology of the motion a little strange. In particular, a point been made, I think, very well by those in opposition, the use of the phrase debt of gratitude. And I do agree with the suggestion that really the electorate should never think that they owe a debt of gratitude to a political party. And that, I think, to think in those terms implies that there is a sense of entitlement amongst a political party. So I think that's unfortunate wording of the motion, and that could easily have been avoided. There's something else about the wording of the motion that puzzled me. Obviously, it was referring to Fianna Fáil, and it had the date of 1926, and 1926, I understand, is the date that Fianna Fáil was founded. And then it has the date 2010. And I was wondering what the significance of that was. If one is then giving the dates of Fianna Fáil as being 1926 to 2010, from its founding until what? But to be serious just for a moment, we all know that we're, all of us, in an acute financial problem. For various countries, it's slightly different. We are outside the euro. I have to say we're very glad that we are outside the euro, and we can let the currency devalue and give ourselves some breathing space in that respect. You are in the euro, and that limits the range of action that can be taken. And you share a problem with other countries within the euro, a problem, and I'm referring here to the underlying problem in the countries in question, being that for a variety of reasons, those countries have become less competitive than they were. That competitiveness has declined through depreciation of the currency, through inflation, through other factors, and that there is at the same time a failure to keep control in public expenditure, so that expenditure is rising, fiscal problems are increasing, and the countries I'm thinking of in question are, of course, Greece, Italy, Spain, Portugal, and Ireland. But I think it's worth saying, and I'm not taking sides on the motion, that Ireland is actually in a different position to the other four. And it's in a different position to the other four because, as I read it, the current government in Ireland is actually trying to tackle the underlying problem. And that can only be tackled because you can't change the currency, you can't change interest rates, there's not much you can do in fiscal terms when you've got an appalling fiscal deficit. It's then doing it the only way left, which is to try and systematically drive down labour costs. And that's an enormously difficult thing to do. An enormously difficult thing to do in the depths of a depression. And so whatever view you take on it, I would say that this redounds to the credit of the current Irish government, driven to it by necessity, no other choice available, but nonetheless actually having the courage to do it. And I very much wonder and I very much doubt whether the Greek government or the Spanish government will show the same degree of courage. And I hope very much that the European Union don't fail to repay that courage by giving the Club Med countries easy terms, which I think would be a very cruel way to reward what has been done. Now, that's my serious comment, and I'm not going to go beyond that in terms of serious comment on the substance of the issue. Could I make a few comments about debating? I enjoyed the debate enormously. You have here 12 very talented debaters, and I'm very glad I'm not on the adjudication panel, because it would be difficult to draw distinctions. But speaking purely personally, one thing that I found a little bit disappointing is the infrequency with which interventions were taken. I think, am I right in saying, correct me if I'm wrong, I think nobody took more than one intervention? And some people may not even have taken that. Now, that I find disappointing, because I've always thought in a debate that it is the interventions which make the debate. But if you have a time limit, particularly if you have a 7-minute time limit, then there's obviously a huge disincentive with regard to interventions. And I make this suggestion because in the House of Commons we dealt with that issue where there are time-limited debates by saying that if persons take an intervention, then they get an extra minute in their contribution, and that operates with regard to 2 interventions. And I just threw that suggestion out because it might result in more interventions being taken, and that might actually increase the interest in the debate. Now, at this stage, having referred to interventions, I can't resist telling you a story of which I am the hero. And it concerns interventions, only in this case, the interventions were not taken. This is a long time ago. It was when Ken Clarke was the Home Secretary, and there was a debate, and I decided to attend the debate. And I had an intervention in mind, and after an appropriate point, I got up and offered to intervene, and Ken, he says, no, no. And I got up, no, no. Each time I got up, no, no. And I was getting a bit irritated at that, so I kept bouncing up quite frequently, and eventually Ken put his head down, only looked at his script, and read his script out without looking up, so I couldn't catch his eye, and there'd be no question of him having to tell me not to speak. And then I gave up trying to intervene. And about 5 minutes later, someone else tried to intervene, and Ken said, oh, I'll take that in a minute. And I, sitting on the bench, in a purely conversational tone, said, oh, good. And the whole house erupted with laughter. I think it's probably the only time when one's had a situation where I think anybody really has managed to turn the entire house against Ken. There was a division after the debate, and I voted with the government. And I voted for the government for the sole reason that then I could go into the government lobby and buttonhole Ken. That's one of the great things about having to vote in a lobby in person. Ministers have to go there, and you can then trap them. So I went up to Ken and I said, look, Ken, you should really have given way to me on that. And he says, oh no, oh no. He said, I knew exactly what intervention you were going to make, and I had no answer for you. So I'm even more frustrated that I never got to make that intervention. However, as I say, I've expressed my view about interventions being the lifeblood of it. Curiously, people frequently say that where I am now in the Lords is a place where the quality of the debate is higher. And I can understand why they say that, because if you get a Lords debate on a subject and you look at it, you'll then see set out a series of very well-crafted speeches, usually very informed, and making good and interesting points. But that's what they are. Just a series of good op-ed articles. There's no interaction. There's no interventions. I remember when I first went into the Lords, I saw this debate. I thought it would be interesting. I went in, and there's a chap speaking. He was a Lib Dem. I thought he was speaking nonsense, purely coincidentally, of course. And so I got up to intervene on him. He was so shocked at the intervention that he was incoherent in response, and he was a QC, senior counsel. Incoherent. I went out of the debate shortly afterwards, and someone came up to me and said, oh, you people up from the Commons, you're so aggressive. I discovered that in the place where I am now, that if you want to make an intervention, you wait until the speech is finished. You don't interrupt that beautifully crafted speech. You wait until it's finished, and then as the chap sits down, you get up and you say, before the noble lord sits down, and you ask your question, you get an answer then. And that's, I'm afraid, the way we do it. It's not debate as I've understood it, but then, as you see, I'm still a bit nostalgic for the rough trade at the other end of the building. There were times, I should say, during the debate when I found myself somewhere else where I got reference to parties with a thirst for power, corruption involving local councillors and planning decisions and all the rest of it. I thought for a moment I must be back at home, because we hear that a little bit and fairly frequently too as well. No, those are the observations that occurred to me, not all the observations which I decided I would make amongst those which occurred to me. Lots of other comments occurred to me, and I might get the opportunity later on in the day to convey my views to some of those individuals who were speaking, because, as I say, I enjoyed what was said. I thought it was superbly good. We will now, I'm afraid, have to wait for the adjudicators to come back, and at this point, I'm going to declare the proceedings adjourned.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your patience during what must have been an extraordinarily difficult and very thorough adjudication. There have been a lot of reminiscences over the past year and the past week about the special anniversary that the Irish Times marks. What you hear very little of, though, is that excruciating period before an adjudication is announced, which is genuine agony for the speakers. I'll therefore endeavour to keep these thanks extraordinarily brief. I would like to thank, though, Dublin City University and in particular David Brady of that society for hosting us this evening in this fantastic venue. We had the benefit of an extraordinarily good chairman tonight, and I think it was to our advantage that he came from outside. David Trimble, we're deeply grateful to you, and I'd ask the first ever winner, Charles Lycett, to show you a token of our appreciation and make a presentation to you. In addition to thanking the speakers tonight for a marvellous final and also all the speakers throughout the competition this year, it must be said that we owe an extraordinary debt of gratitude to the Irish Times for the past half-century, for the constant commitment that they have shown to this competition, for the initiative in introducing it and for continuing to support it to such an extent today. It's a wonderful thing that the newspaper does. I would ask two people from the Irish Times, Janet Stafford, who spent a decade working on this competition, and to the editor, Geraldine Kennedy, that you show your thanks as they receive a presentation from two past conveners, Michael Moriarty and Leo Mulrooney. The jazz band is about to begin playing in the lobby, and when they conclude, there will be a DJ. There is a late license. I call upon the editor of the Irish Times, Geraldine Kennedy, to give you the adjudication.
Chairman, competitors and finalists, ladies and gentlemen, it's a tremendous pleasure for me to be here this evening to mark and announce the winners of the 50th Irish Times debate. I'd like in particular to thank Lord Trimble for coming here this evening to chair this debate. I think it would be true to say that where some of you may think that you're very good debaters, there's no person that I remember in my time in reporting politics who had a more difficult challenge to engage people in debate than he had in the biggest historical project in the island on this generation, the peace process. I will be extraordinarily brief. Please bear with me a minute, and I will list off a few people that I have to thank on behalf of the Irish Times. Professor Ferdinand von Brzezinski of DCU for hosting the final, Professor Brent Northup for arranging the trip to the US for the winners and travelling over to adjudicate, Gary Holbrook, the American professor who founded the tour to the USA in the first place, fellow adjudicators Charles Lycett, one of the first winner, Leo Mulrooney and Michael Moriarty, Frank Kennedy, the debate's convener this year, who did a superb job, I'd just like to put on record that it was he who selected the topic for this evening's debate. The Irish Times had nothing to do with it, and he's no relation, has no connection with me at all. Finally, I would like to thank David Brady and Kenneth Hines of DC